sent it. By the way, we're recording, so stay on task because that's what means. So we're going to talk figurative language, and I am going to kind of model a setup on notes for you guys today. There are 6 pieces of figurative language we're going to talk about. I'm going to model probably 2. 2 is where most people were like, okay, dude, we got it. Yes, sir. I froze myself to the screen. Well, that's awkward looking. There we go. No, there we go. It likes to hit the freeze button like 900 times in a row. Yes, you can still sharpen your pencil even if we're recording. I'm super loud. And also the microphone's right next to my face. Figurative language is kind of fun and awkward. You know, because I like to make things awkwardly fun. We use figurative language constantly. We're at it all the time. But we haven't taught it yet this year, mostly because we want to talk about inferencing first and how to inference really deeply into the meaning. Because once we start getting figurative language, we get real deep. We're gonna inference out the main character and almost everything about him by figurative language in the first 2 sentences of this book today. And we're gonna be right, because his figurative language makes it that easy. And I will tell you, this one of the reasons I love to teach Christopher Paul Curtis is not just the fact that he's an African-American author, he's a good author, he brings a different perspective, like not just that stuff. His use of figurative language is amazing. And you can tell a different vibe about his book immediately. Gordon Corman didn't use a lot of figurative language. He used some, but not a lot. Figurative language, the definition, it's going to sound real weird. Then when we start talking about it, it's going to make a lot of sense, but it's not going to sound any less weird. So the definition of figurative language is when you are using words and the meaning is not exactly what the words are supposed to mean. So weird, right? So let's set up notes so that we're ready while I'm talking. I don't care if you use paper or a doc. There is a place under the notes section of your Google Classroom. And I also know some students told me last week the notes section is a little bit hard to use because the wording is weird. So I'm going to go through it today and change all the titles. So that way the titles are a little bit easier to find what you're looking for. And I'll move it from the bottom of the classroom up to probably somewhere around the middle. Yes, ma'am. You can either add a Google Doc or you can take a picture of something you write by hand, and whatever you want to do is fine. So in my Google Doc, what I wanted to do today, I'm going to add my title because titles are necessary. Figurative language. I'm going to bump it down, and I'm going to go to insert table, so that'll make it nice and neat. Okay, we're going to have 3 things. We're going to have a type of figurative language, we're going to define it, and we're going to give examples. In my past classes, I've done 2 columns. One column was for the name, and then the definition of example were together. The other way we can do it is there's 1 column each, one for the name, one for the definition, one for the example. Do we have any preferences on how we set this up? Nobody cares? Okay, so in my mind, it's easier to go by 2. One has the name and then one has the information. So I go to insert table, and it just kind of lets you pick your setup. So I had 2 by 6, so 2 across and then 6 down. I'm gonna highlight these. I want these centered because I like my notes to look good. Selena, do you have a computer yet? Okay. Thanks, Nicole. Okay, since you guys are still getting set up, I'm going to move forward, but I'm just going to go kind of slow. Okay. My types of figurative language I'm going to put over here, and then information I need about them I'm going to put over here. I'm going to keep it pretty simple, But here's why this is important. There are reading standards and writing standards that both have figurative language, and they are big, and they are map tested, and they are super duper easy, and they're about the only entertaining thing about the map test. So we're going to hit it pretty hard. Also, as a writer, you need figurative language. Figurative language, it's like hot sauce on a taco. Like, all tacos are good. You can't go wrong with the taco, right? But if they just need a little extra zip to it, you add a couple of drops of that hot sauce, and then it's the greatest thing in the world, yeah? What happens if you add way too much, though? It blows it up. So what figurative language does is it adds a little zip to the meaning, and you get more bang for your buck out of the words you choose. When I read you the first sentence today, because we're only going to do maybe like 2-3 paragraphs today because we will run out of time. When I read you the first sentence, it's going to read very differently to anything you've probably ever read before. And it's specifically because of the way the author uses figurative language. So let's talk types. Oh, by the way, you're going to start doing writing projects with figurative language tomorrow. So you may need this. These notes you're taking in more than one class. Yes, ma'am. Oh, it's just names and like information. So we're going to start off in second grade. Little kids don't do figurative language because they don't have their brain is just not wired for it. Like, have you ever noticed when you talk to a little bitty kid, they understand exactly what you say? And if you say something that's just a little like funny or sarcastic, or they just are like, what? I had a student taught in second grade, and my kids cried all day long because they never understood what I was saying, because I had just finished a student teaching in 5th and 6th grade. So when I'm trying to talk to these kids, I mean, you can tell by the way I talk, like I don't talk any more different to little kids than I do right now. Number one, they were terrified because I'm like 11 feet taller than them. And number two, a lot of times they didn't really understand what I was saying because I was bad at not using figurative language because they just didn't get it. Similes are something we start very, very young with because they're super direct. A simile is comparing two things using the word like or as. So when I say busy as a bee to a little kid, they're like, oh, that means you're doing a lot of stuff and moving a lot, because that's what bees do. It's very, very plain and concrete, so it's easy to understand. Wise as an owl, cute as a button, stinky like an old sock. So if I'm teaching an 8-year-old figurative language, or I'm an 8-year-old mom, and that 8-year-old comes in from playing in the yard and it's July. I'm like, whoo, you're stinky as an old sock. Does that little kid think they're an old sock? No. They don't think they're an old sock. They get it. What do they know that means? I smell bad. Does a little kid want to be stinky like an old sock? No. So does that little kid then pick up the meaning of what mom wants them to do? Yes, mom wants them to go wash up, take a shower, and get some non-stinky clothes on. I do think it's about second grade. I've never taught kids that young before. About second grade with figurative language, and we start with a very simple one. And I'm sure you guys remember being little kids and talking about like and as and doing these little cute projects with you fold paper, right? I'm sure if you walk through the hallways down there, we'd see them too. So let's go back to the notes, and I'll show you guys how I would set this up. Now, you do need to know, I don't care what you write down for notes. If you have a simile that your parents used all the time when you were little, or if you were in Miss Lamar's class and she's got one like special little simile that she used all the time, like whatever means something to you is the one you should use. I tend to go with gross and funny figurative language because if you laugh at it, it kind of hits your memory a little harder. So our first one is a simile. The definition first, and then an example. And I'm going to copy and paste those in. So I'm going to type them later because I'm productively lazy and I'm okay with it. As long as you're lazy for good reason and get you places, run with it. So the definition of a simile is comparing two things using like or as. those into quotation marks so we know they're good. The thing we do need to do is we need to be comparing two things, and we have to use one of those two words. An example. Stinky is dirty sock. To make that more sixth grade language, you get back from basketball practice or softball practice or football practice. And your parents are like, you smell like roadkill. Gross. Go take a shower. You know what they mean, right? You don't actually smell like roadkill. I hope. If not, you need to take your pads to the car wash. Or you need to take your softball pants to the car wash. Stop. Been too long. I'm going to leave this up for a second to have the coffee so that you guys can make sure we're caught up, set up, cut and paste. But that sounds weird on YouTube. Listen to Mr. G pour coffee while I present the video. Yes, ma'am. Okay, no big deal. We're literally recording this right now, so you can come back on the video, or you can just do it from memory, or you can be like, hey, Jada, what do I put here? And she'll be like, I got you. Right? Yeah. So, back to figurative language. The other one that we start pretty early is metaphor. We don't start it in second grade because second graders are too young. They do not get it. They do not understand. Typically, fourth graders, maybe third graders, you have to really have a very in control imagination. Metaphor is when you compare two things that are not similar by saying that they're the exact same thing. That sounds super awkward. So this example I really like. My mom was a real bear this morning. So if this is non-figurative, if this is literal language, you get up, you brush your teeth, and you walk downstairs. You say, hey, Mom. And she says, "Roar!" And she bares her killer vicious claws. And her blood-dripping fangs are bared. And she's 8 foot tall, covered in thick fur. No. Eating family members. The kitchen is trashed. She's in an Alaskan river fishing for salmon with her hands. Like, this is not, like, that's not what you mean at all. Although, you want that vibe. Because what does it actually mean if you said your mom's a real bear this morning? Braylon. She didn't get enough sleep, so how's she acting? Grumpy, angry, easy to set off, right? Like me all the time. We use figurative language because if you're just like, my mother was very grumpy this morning, you get no real, like, we all know what you mean, but we just don't really care because it's not interesting. But if you say, my mom was a real bear this morning, like, gives it a little extra zip. It's a little hot sauce on that taco, right? We all do, where they're always good for metaphors. A little hot sauce on the taco, right? So when it comes to notes, oh yeah, color code too. Simile was, no, I want to do the dump paint feature. So we go to your 3 dots, background color, that was yellow. Metaphor's red. I'm gonna put all my writing in bold too. Metaphor. The definition of a metaphor is comparing two things by saying they are the same. Another good example, the clouds are fluffy cotton balls in the sky. Attention passengers, we're cruising comfortably at 36,000 feet, but please buckle your safety belts. We're about to hit 2 billion tons of airborne cotton balls, and it's bound to be a bumpy ride. No, that's not happening, right? Like, all clouds are is water. You're gonna look up and it's water. and they're cool, but they're fluffy looking. Like it looks like if you jumped on a cloud, you would be landing on a giant mound of fluffy cotton balls. Instead, you would fall to your death because they're water vapor suspended in the upper atmosphere and they wouldn't slow you down at all. But it'd be real pretty for about 30 seconds before you would went, ah, and wish you had a parachute. So an example, I'm going to go with the mom is a bear. My mom is a bear. Warning. Was she a bear? If she was, please call the conservation department immediately, and also probably Child Protective Services, because we're going to have to find your actual mom. Something has gone wrong. But we all know what that means, even though we don't actually have to say what it means. Like when I said my mom's a real bear this morning, hands instantly went up and faces instantly went to sheer terror because they're like, oh, I've been there. Everybody's real quiet because they don't want me to tell their mom that. Your secret is safe. We're only going to be recorded and broadcast publicly on YouTube by this afternoon. So if your mom was a bear this morning, probably don't talk real loud. I'm not going to say your name just in case your mom gets access to this. But that'll work very well into our next one. So I'm not going to continue putting those notes on there. I think by now you guys kind of get the point and have the setup. Remember to keep doing that color coding. We're going to try to move a little bit faster now. You guys are doing good at actually saying things and staying on task at the same time. Next one, hyperbole. Say it with me. Hyperbole. Not hyperbole. It looks like hyperbole. It's not hyperbole. It's hyperbole. I know this because a sixth grader once bet me a recess and we Googled it and I was right. And I took the recess because I win. Haha. So don't make bets with Mr. G unless you're willing to pay up. Hyperbole is an intentional exaggeration. And for those of you guys that have been in my class for, I don't know, more than 1 minute, you know I use these all the time. These are a very common kind of figurative language. They give you probably the most bang for your buck because everybody knows what you mean, but what you say is massively inflated. And so let's use person who shall not be named when he said, my mom really was a bear this morning. And he knows we're going to publish this to YouTube, but we're going to call him person who shall not be named. If person who shall not be named mom saw that video on YouTube, person who shall not be named might say, oh my God, Mr. G, my mom saw that lesson on YouTube when I said she was a real bear every morning, and now she's going to kill me. Is his mom, like, do we call the police and put him in protective custody? I mean, you may feel like it's necessary, but it's not literally, your parents are not literally going to end your life. You might be afraid of their response. They might be angry. You might get grounded. You might be digging holes, like in the book Holes. Like there might be a lot of things happening, but that hole is not to bury you in because you're very expensive. You've already been around for 12 years. They're not going to start over now. It's too late. They've already got a lot of money invested in you. You may get in trouble, but you're not actually going to get killed. Right? We use hyperbole all the time. Like the thing I hear from parents constantly is, my kid will not stop talking. And I'm like, I totally know what you mean. But does that mean they're being literal? No. You're not born talking. Never sleep. Never eat. Never do anything other than talk. Now, if your parents had a long day at work and you've got a lot to say and you're a little hyper when they get home, that might be how they feel. And then that feeling is what we want, right? We're using figurative language to get a vibe, to get a feeling. We're not using it because it's exactly true. If you listen for hyperbole, you will hear it multiple times every hour. We'll hit it within the first paragraph of the book. If you listen to commercials or television, they use it all the time. If you want to give kind of a fun vibe to your narrative story, because this is not like this figurative language is not something you'll find in an informational or persuasive writing, correct? This is not something you'll find in a formal writing. This is very informal, but it gives the meaning extra pop. If you want to add a kind of a funny, more entertaining vibe to your narrative, hyperbole is a great way to go. Yes, ma'am. No, it's not sarcastic. It's intentional exaggeration. To get the definition of this one correctly, you have to use the word exaggeration, because that's what we're doing. If we're taking a point that's the size of a dinner plate and we're blowing it up to the size of a hot air balloon. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, totally. Exaggerating is just another form. It's the same word, just a different tense. Oh, by the way, color-coded green. Idiom. Idiom is a more upper level kind of figurative language. Like, I'm sure you guys have learned hyperbole in 5th grade. I think it was a 5th grade standard. We talk about it a lot more in 6th grade because we make better ones in 6th grade than 5th graders generally do. Your brains have changed in structure and ability a lot this year. Idiom doesn't really have a definition. It's just kind of a bucket where we put all the other figurative language that doesn't have specific rules. Idioms are phrases that don't mean exactly like they sound they should. When I went to college, I went to Southeast Missouri State in Cape Girardeau. They have a sister university in Japan. So a lot of Japanese students moved into the dorms with us who spoke English mostly, but they spoke English as a second language. So they learned it like we would learn math or science. They didn't speak it all the time with American people. So all of a sudden, when you throw them onto a dorm floor with 100 other people who all speak English, the number one thing they said they didn't understand was people use these idioms all the time. And you just kind of have to be from here and understand. Like when we say, it broke my heart, a person who is not an English speaker is going to interpret that as your heart was physically broken and we need a heart surgeon. Because they only hear the exact words. They don't hear the meaning that we're inferring. Or that you're inferring, sorry. I smiled from ear to ear. It's a terrifying image. But do we know if somebody's smiling ear to ear, we know that means they're just really happy. It doesn't even necessarily mean they're physically smiling, does it? If you're smiling from ear to ear, or if you're on cloud 9, we know you're happy. You're not actually sitting on a cloud because we have previously discussed that would be tragic. It won't work. My heart sank. I jumped out of my skin. That cracks me up. If somebody's cracking up, am I getting a broom? I'm like, do I need all the king's soldiers and all the king's men to put you back together again? Because you've shattered into a million. No. You know what that means, even though the words don't exactly match the meaning. Yes, sir. Let's save the cloud questions for right after class so we can stay on task. But right after class, I got this. Good on notes? Irony. Irony is another meaning-based one. If someone is being ironic, they say something that is the opposite of what they mean. In junior high, you will learn that there are 3 types of irony: verbal, situational, and dramatic. That's why I got the Sanger chart. You don't need that for 6th grade. For 6th grade, you need to know if someone's being ironic, they say the opposite or write the opposite of what they mean. So if somebody emails me and says, hey, Mr. G, I'm going to be out today. Do I have any work from you? And I say, no, we don't do work in this class. That's irony, right? That person knows I'm making a joke, and they know because they didn't even actually mean like, are we doing anything? They know we're doing something. So when I respond like that, that's an ironic response. What a lot of people link with irony is sarcasm. It doesn't mean every piece of sarcasm is ironic, but a lot of them are. This is like 2 people who look the same but aren't related. Irony and sarcasm are not the same thing, but they are very, very closely related. And in fact, if we did a Venn diagram, there's a lot, that little centerpiece where the 2 overlap is probably bigger than the 2 that are outside of it. So some other examples of irony. It's a little bit harder. Irony is something you really have to think about. Using something ironically is easy to do badly and hard to do well. What if I floated up behind you during RTI and I said, Lily, you got all your work done? She's like, no, I didn't do anything today. I know she did. Honestly, the fault is mine. The question was a bad one. Her response is ironic because she said the opposite of what she actually meant. But did I understand? That means she did all of her work? Yeah, of course I did. Last piece of figurative language that we're going to talk about is onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia are spelled out sounds, and they're very, very particular. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah, you guys are doing an onomatopoeia project right now. So onomatopoeia, I'll spell it for you since I don't think I've ever spelled this word correctly the first time myself. Onomatopoeia. It has more vowels than any word has the right to have. That's a couple, but not enough. Okay, background whispers. Remember we're recording? Remember that sounds real weird on the recording? Onomatopoeia is a sound word. And I don't know, you guys are more familiar with this today than I thought you would be. The old school, like 1950s Batmans, they're very, very cheesy. There were no special effects back at that time that could be used on a television show. So during a fight to show action, they would have a little spin in and then it would go pow, and it'd be in like big janky letters and it'd be bright yellow and red. And they did that for the same reason graphic novel authors do that. They put in onomatopoeias to add a little pop of sound that would have been really hard and not sounded right to put into that television show. So when Batman punches the Joker, like it's going to look super cheesy if they have to fake it. So instead of faking it, they put in that onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia very heavily used in picture-based media like a graphic novel or a comic book because it adds a big zip of action. And it's easy for us to imagine that sound, even though the spelling of it is very awkward. Like there's no specific spelling rules for onomatopoeia. Like if I use the word boom and it was a really big boom and I went B-O-O-O-O-O-O-M exclamation point, it's hit or miss whether or not Mrs. G will say, cut it back. Because we would, as teachers, know you were describing a bigger, longer lasting boom. But a lot of these, like there's not any particular spelling that's necessarily right or wrong because you can't actually spell a sound. You're kind of just making it up. I will tell you, if you're writing a narrative, be very careful with onomatopoeia. For some reason, it does not work particularly well in a narrative if you use it more than once in a paragraph. Even once in a paragraph, it gets old pretty quick. It's pretty powerful figurative language, but it's also, it gives kind of a more of a fun vibe and less of a, here's my serious story vibe. So you just have to know what you're writing and see whether or not it fits. Yes, ma'am. This slide is not in Google Classroom. But I'm going to post this video later today. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That is the last one. So I'm going to come back here to the beginning. So we had a couple of people miss that. Simile, comparing two things by using the word like or as. That is all we have for figurative language. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the meet, and then we can move on to starting the Watson's Go to Birmingham. Do you guys just want me to keep the meet going? Not thinking about it? Okay. So if all you're looking for is figurative language, you can stop now. If you're looking to hear us talk about the Watson's Go to Birmingham, keep watching. If you are sitting in class right now or sitting at home right now, let's talk about expectations again. I encouraged you strongly to take notes while we were reading school together to keep you focused and keep your memory on point. I'm telling you on this one, it's going to be a very large points assignment, at least once a week. And when I say once a week, if on Friday it says post your notes, assignments in Google Classroom, what I'm expecting is a picture of all the notes you've taken for the week or just attaching your doc. I'm looking for maybe 5 important things per hour, which is not a ton. It's enough to keep you focused. I'm looking for signposts like aha moment where we learn something new. I'm going to get you a copy on paper copy so you can read these. What's this one? That's true, but what is this? A memory moment where we change to a new setting so that we can see something that's happened in the past. A tough question where the main character literally asks a question, almost like it's to the air. Gordon Corman tended to use those at the end of chapters. I will tell you, Christopher Paul Curtis does that, and he uses them inside of the chapters more. About this one? Contrast and contradiction where the main character does something that is unexpected. Words of the wiser where one character offers another character advice, and frequently it comes from an older, more experienced person to a younger person. And this last one, again and again, where we have that theme of bringing up the same thing over and over again, not just because we like have to use the word Flint, Michigan, because that's where our setting is at. It has to have a little bit more meaning than that. We know Gordon Corman's favorite signposts were again and again in contrast and contradiction. I will tell you, every author is a little different, although those tend to be the heavy hitters. Christopher Paul Curtis does use again and again very frequently, but not like Gordon Corman. He does use contrast and contradiction. I don't think anybody uses it as much as Gordon Corman that I've ever read for an author, because it's almost every paragraph. Two big ones to watch out for with Christopher Paul Curtis. Tough questions, where the main character asks a question of themselves that kind of gives us a hint to where the action is going. And words of the wiser, he hides them in action. When Christopher Paul Curtis is using a signpost, he is very frequently putting it into a very active point in the story where you may not notice it. So it might slide under the radar. So if you notice, maybe we'll point them out as a class. When I do these assignments to have you turn in your notes, I'm thinking 40 or 50 points an assignment, because it's an everyday, ongoing, all-day thing. It should be valuable. If you don't do them, it's going to be a big glaring red mark in your SIS. If you do them incorrectly, it's going to be a big glaring red mark in your SIS. So I'm looking for signposts. I'm looking for just things that caught your attention. You're like, oh, that seems like it could be a big deal. Write it down. We'll count it. Figurative language is a good thing, because figurative language is intentionally there to up the meaning, which means whatever they're using figurative language about, they want you to notice. They want you to pay attention to that. How you feeling? Good? I don't care if you're doing notes on paper or doing notes digitally. That is up to you. I personally would do notes on a doc, but we are going to be reading, so if it bothers you to go back and forth between the two windows, paper is totally fine. I will tell you, if you lose them, I'm going to say, that's unfortunate. It looks like you needed to redo them. And if we're on page 2, that's no big deal. If we're on page 50 and you say, I lost my notes, you got a problem. And it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks of a problem. We're going to bust this book out a lot quicker than we did school. I don't intend to take them 2 months on this one. I intend to do it this month, which means, might you have to finish a chapter at home and answer an EQ during RTI? Yes. Am I going to do that on purpose? No, I'm not. But it might be a thing. We're moving slow. Yes. I would say, if you have headphones or earbuds, I would start making them a thing that you bring to class every day. Because on Thursday, when we're doing iStation days, and it's going to be every Thursday from now on when we're doing iStation days, if you don't have earbuds, I'm not going to let you do iStation. I'm going to take your recess until I get my 45 minutes of iStation time out here. So that's 3. Because if you're choosing not to come to class prepared, and we've given anybody who needs earbuds, there's no excuse anymore. Got to be ready for class. We got to be ready for junior high, and junior high is not going to be like, it's okay, just take it. They're going to say, dude, why don't you have it? You're 3 years from a driver's license. Why aren't you ready for my class? Cool. I would just make sure that's a thing you start bringing every day. We are going to be doing the reading through a Google Meet so that you guys can do more of the reading than me this time. What that means is it'll come out of the surround sound speakers, but if that's too much or annoying to you and you want like one earbud in and one earbud for the classroom, that's fine by me. But I would make sure you start having them, because I'm sure you've noticed we're tightening down things a little bit around here. Yes, ma'am. You'll have an essential question almost every chapter. Yes. Oh, you won't meet them today. We'll be fine. We're only going to make it through probably 2 or 3 paragraphs anyway, because we're right up at time. So, the Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963. This first chapter is posted, but I'm reading it out of a book rather than off the computer because when I cut and pasted it, it did weird things with paragraphs, and I have to go in and edit them. First chapter, and you wonder why we get called the Weird Watson. It was one of those super duper cold Saturdays. One of those days when you breathed out your breath, kind of hung frozen in the air like a hunk of smoke, and you could walk along and look exactly like a train blowing out big, fat, white puffs of smoke. This reads different than many, many books we've read. First thing is there is figurative language that is a simile, right? Like big, fat, white puffs of smoke, comparing your breath to the smoke coming from a train. So inferencing based off that figurative language, how old is this main character? How old is a kid who's walking out on the playground going, watching their breath steam? 10, 11, 12, 13. So somewhere probably middle grades, maybe 16, but I'm thinking more like 5th, 6th grade. So this, I'm inferencing that this person is about your age, maybe a little younger, because it's more common if you're like 10 than if you're like 12. Oh, I do it too, and I'm 41, so it's entertaining for about 30 seconds. But if you look out at 4th grade recess, that first day where it's cold and you can see your breath, 90% of the 4th graders are going, especially if they can finally take their mask off because they're 6 feet apart. So we're inferencing about this kid. We inference about the way he speaks. That's what really gets me. Is this a grammatically correct speaker? Listen again. It was one of those super duper cold Saturdays. One of those days when you breathed out your breath, kind of hung frozen in the air like a hunk of smoke, and you could walk along and look exactly like a big train blowing out big fat white puffs of smoke. Is this more of a formal speaker like Cap Anderson? Or is this more of an informal, childish kind of speaker? Is that Josh over there? What do you think, Josh? Informal. A little bit young. Possibly not the most educated. I don't want to infer too much because I talk like that when I'm just kind of messing around too. Like I'm usually pretty formal, a little more formal in class than I am like just hanging out at home. But like if I don't have to speak formally, I don't. Most people don't. And this kid is clearly just kind of playing around in the cold. Clearly the setting is freezing. It was so cold that if you were stupid enough to go outside, your eyes would automatically blink 1,000 times all by themselves. Probably just so the juice inside won't freeze up, inside of them won't freeze up. It was so cold that if you spit, the slob would be an ice cube before it hit the ground. It was about 1 zillion degrees below zero. What kind of figurative language is that? Not metaphor. It doesn't compare two things. What does it do? Hyperbole? Because it intentionally, it can't be 1 zillion degrees. 1 zillion is not even a real number. We know what that means without actually having it mean that thing, right? It's an intentional exaggeration. If it's 1 zillion degrees below zero, it's not 30 degrees cold. It's cold like next weekend cold. Like the low is going to be 3 degrees cold. But I will tell you I read the book Dog Song by Gary Paulson. He's doing a dog mushing through the Alaskan wilderness. And one of the ways dog mushers use to measure temperature is they spit. And if spit crackles when it hits the ground, that means it's -20. If the spit bounces, it means it's closer to -40. So he's talking, if he's being literal, which he might be based on the setting, it might be that like -40. So the next paragraph will tell us if he lives in Flint, Michigan, but we've got 2 minutes of class left. So I'm going to go ahead and pop open Google Earth. So let's play like, we know we're about right here, right? Flint, Michigan is a little bit further north. So here's Flint, Michigan, right about here. Through Lake Huron, like this is Canada. Like it's far north. It's pretty on level with like southern Minnesota, Iowa, Vermont, New York, where there's 2 feet of snow on the ground today. Flint, Michigan is cold. It's Canada style cold. Uh, Real talk. He could spit and it could freeze before it hits the ground if he's outside. He's talking about blinking because it's so cold that his eyeballs would freeze. Not actually his eyeballs, but could it be little ice crystals on his actual eyes if it's that cold and that windy? Yeah. We'll get a little deeper into this family and how they work tomorrow. Notes, headphones, computer, and we're good. I'll see you guys tomorrow.